vibration of creation, the cosmic hum. The eternal cyclic rhythm of earth, moon, and sun. Earth song is the ancient conversation between shore and sea. The love ballad between flower and bee. Earth song is the melody of mountains that rise and fall.
Hello, beautiful women, and welcome back to another interview in our beautiful series that is Embody the Empress, how to live, how to blossom and flourish in harmony with the natural world. I am so excited today because I get to interview again one of my favorite women in Australia, Kylie Pinwill. Kylie, welcome back, and thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Edwina. When you asked, I didn't even read the email to see what it was about. I was just like, yep, I'm in. Because it's always fun.
Yeah, love it. So, for those of you that haven't met Kylie before now, Kylie's a clinical nutritionist. She's the host of the Hormone Hub podcast. She's the creator of the Hormone Code and is the go-to person for anybody that is into that perimenopause, menopause stage in life and wants to find the tools to negotiate that with grace. So, what I want to do, Kylie, is just start this conversation with one of my favorite topics, which is looking at the tool bag that you had in that 14 to 21. You were given, we absorb the beliefs, the thoughts, the ideas, the understanding of who we are in the world and what's possible for us in that time in our lives. And then we stand on the cusp of womanhood and, where we launch ourselves from there. So when you think about yourself at 21, what were your thoughts about what you were going to do in life? And then we'll look at how you ended up doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, yeah, it feels like two different lives.
I know.
Wow. So 21. So I was just finished university for the first time. And yeah, it was travel. It was just travel. It was all about, I think I was working two jobs at the time, just to bank the money to travel. And yeah, I didn't really have a plan beyond traveling, as you do when you're 21. I was just saying to Edwina, my son had a week off work, so just decided he's 20. He goes, "Oh, the snow looks good in Japan. I'll just go." And off he went.
Yeah.
So to do that again, and I said to him, I said, enjoy that because you've got pretty much zero responsibility, zero, you can.
Yeah.
So just go, and I love that. And I feel excited for the kids because they still have that. And for some reason, somewhere along the line, we've put I've put, restrictions on that because it's sort of like, oh no, we've got these bills coming up, or we've got that, or we've got this family function that we can't miss, or, like there's all these roadblocks that I put up, and I put up, and I'm very aware that I'm the one putting up those roadblocks, but it's just, for them, it's a blank slate. So so Kylie at 21 had a big blank slate with a one-way ticket.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting conversation because we are the ones that put up the roadblocks. I think the older we get, the more we go through life, the more fears we kind of build. And then we start focusing on all, I talk about we're in creation mode, which is ideal, where we want to be. We're creating this life, and so we go to university, we do the course, we buy the house, we find the partner, we get married, we have the kids, and then I feel like we go into maintenance mode
Yes.
rather than creation. We're in maintenance mode. It's like, how do I keep carrying this heavy load of all the stuff I've collected? And
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
when our life force just starts to
Yeah.
leak out.
Yes.
So it's
Well, it
interesting that
is.
you brought that up, because I think
Yeah.
it's really relevant in
Yeah.
this conversation of like, what are you creating next? But anyway,
Yeah,
we'll come back to
absolutely.
that.
Yeah. And it's a thing. I think I've got the awareness of it. So it's what
Yeah.
I choose to do with it
Yeah.
is what I need to, step into and fill into. So that's my goal for this year, is to bring down some of those barriers that I've put
Yeah.
up for myself about, stopping 50, nearly 54-year-old me from doing what 21-year-old me was doing.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. So I got sidetracked as well. You went to uni for this first time. What were you doing? Did you say? And I just lost it.
So I did communication and marketing the first
Ah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's very tied to clinical nutrition, obviously.
Huge links. But having said that, weirdly, then
Yeah,
running an online business,
exactly.
yeah, although the marketing is very different to the type of marketing we were doing back in
Yeah.
the early 90s.
Yeah. But it was adding to your toolbox.
Yeah.
So let's move from there. So
Yeah.
how did you get from there? What was the transition? Was it something with your own health that you had to discover, or what was the catalyst?
Not really. I think, like I had always, as a teenager, had, and I'm not even going to say weight issues, because looking back, I did not have a weight problem, but I had very big body awareness and body image issues. And I think I carried that with me through my teenage years
Yeah.
because, I'm quite tall. I had big boobs,
Yeah.
and none of my friends had boobs, and I was very conscious of having boobs and curves and being tall, because it just made, in my mind, it made me very obvious.
Yeah.
Whereas and I think I'd always been sporty, so that wasn't an issue. But sort of a long story short, how I got there was, I went off, did my travel, came back, and I was working for a company who you may remember, the brand Fiorelli, which is it was fashion brand. So we did handbags, and their signature handbag was sort of like a black and white handbag, and it had these like chunky zippers with a whistle hanging off, and like the whistle was sort of like the signature gimmick or gadget. So anyway, I was the national sales manager for Fiorelli handbags, and then the company was sold and to a company in Melbourne. I was living in Sydney because that's where I grew up. And I had the option, I was newly married, and I had the option of keeping my job as national sales manager, which I absolutely loved the job, and moving to Melbourne. That was
Right.
the clicker. But because we were quite newly married, we wanted to start a family, like I really didn't want to move to Melbourne. And I sort of think about it now, and I was like, actually, I would move to Melbourne tomorrow in a heartbeat. But at the time, it just wasn't the right thing for
Yeah.
us. So I said no to that, ended up obviously with no job. And then I thought, okay, well, we're going to have a family. I'll just become a personal trainer.
Yeah.
So I became a personal trainer. And in the first 5 minutes of being a personal trainer, I realized I hated it. Because while I enjoyed going to the gym to do my thing, I really didn't. And the idea of taking money from someone to make them walk on a treadmill, like it really just, I was like, and back then it was all about cardio. So, there wasn't so much in the weight room. So it was cardio. So I'm just like literally standing there putting people on a treadmill or putting people on a stepper and making it go faster or slower.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I can't do this.
No.
So anyway, so then I sort of went sort of through and like just various conversations that you
Yeah.
have. And you kind of realize it's actually not the exercise, it was the food. And because I love my food and I have always been able to put sort of like a healthier spin on food, so if I've got a recipe or a cheesecake recipe or whatever, like I've always been able to play with recipes to sort of just put a healthier twist on it. So one of my friends actually suggested to me, she said, oh, why don't you study nutrition? I was like, oh my God, that's genius. So then went back again, retrained, studied, and became a clinical nutritionist. So, and then that was while my kids were, and in between that, I had 3 children. So, as you do.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're starting to, raise children and it's a natural thing to want to, work out how to feed them, and it all becomes part of a bigger conversation.
Absolutely. And I started off in family nutrition.
Yep.
And kids nutrition and kids sport nutrition as well.
Yeah.
So that was a big focus in my early nutrition days.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I know my journey's been really interesting with food, and it's because it's a predominant thing that I think about and love to talk about. But I think the difference between what you learn in like in school, in an institution that like you gather things from books, and then when you're actually in the real life situation and you're talking to people, you're living yourself, you're feeding children, you're going through different stages in your own life, what you pick up in lived wisdom as opposed to what you pick up out of a book is so vastly, it changes radically. I don't know if you've found that through your studies and then you experiment for yourself, but
absolutely.
I think that the beauty of working with somebody who lives what they teach, I think, is what I'm really trying to come to, is when you work with somebody who lives what they teach, the wisdom that you can get from that is a much deeper wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think working with clients also where they're at.
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge learning for me, is that nutrition can never be, all of our health can never be a one size fits all. It can never be sort of a prescriptive, this is, these are your superfoods that you must eat, go eat them, because everybody has different taste preferences. Everybody has different family circumstances. Everyone has different time restraints. Everyone has a different feeling about cooking and preparing food. So to meet people where they're at and make things as easy as possible, so they're doing something rather than this idea of, oh my God, I'm going to see a nutritionist, she's going to make me give up gluten, dairy, sugar, alcohol, fun, and I'm going to have to eat kale and spinach and chicken. Like it just is not, that's not how I work, and that's not how, if you see a nutritionist or a dietitian and they tell you that, no, find someone else.
Yeah, that's that. I can remember.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
No. And this is where that teaching from that lived wisdom makes such a big difference, because when you've been at it for a while, you've been there, done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I have done everything must be 100% organic and everything must be perfect, and I must have the right balance of green things and orange things and red things. But then, life with, and I think having kids teaches you that, you need to take the perfectionism out. And also be kind to yourself as well. So, like it's not practical. It would be great if we could all go and have organic veggies, but, it's not available to everyone and it's not affordable for everyone. So, if a bag of chopped salad from the supermarket is what you can manage on that particular day, it's better than going through the drive-through and picking up McDonald's on the way home, right? So it's just when you put it in perspective, you just go, okay, well, something is better than nothing. So
I remember it was I did my functional nutrition with Cindy O'Meara, who's here in Australia, and I remember her saying the ultimate superfood is something that you pick out of your out of your own garden. So the parsley, the lettuce,
yeah,
and I've never forgotten that, because I think there's a
yeah.
lot of wisdom in the
Absolutely.
simplicity of that.
Yeah. But I also want to sort of let the women who are listening who don't have those things
Oh,
going
yeah.
and have like me, black thumbs. I'm very lucky I have a very green thumbed husband. But so just to sort of let you know that if you don't have that, it's okay to have what's available to you as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, the essence of this conversation that I really want everybody listening to keep at the forefront of their mind is everything that Kylie and I are talking about is first, trust yourself first, trust your inner knowing. So as Kylie said, if you go to a nutritionist and they're like, cut out this, everything, and it's like, actually, that doesn't feel right for me, then trust. But we get to unpack that a little bit, because there's layers within that. And we talked, Kylie and I were talking before I pressed, record about intuitive eating. And I remember having a conversation, and I wonder if it was with you, but I can't remember. It might have been on a series that I did some time ago about I wasn't a fan of intuitive eating, of the whole message of intuitive eating, because there's a lot of foods that are really addictive, and I thought it was, in my mind, I wasn't putting trust in women to trust themselves with this. So let's unpack intuitive eating from your perspective. How do you think about it? How do you talk about it? How do you guide women with that?
Yeah, I think it is something that we need to be, it's a great idea in theory, but I think we do need to be wary of it and sort of think about what that actually means.
Yeah.
So definitely intuitive eating is not eating, oh, I have a bag of chips because that's what I feel like.
Yeah.
It's not, so intuitive eating from my perspective is more really getting in tune with what works for your body and what doesn't work for your body. So there's no, spoiler alert, there's no magic ingredient that's going to give you more energy, help you lose weight, help your digestive system work well, so there's no bloating, help balance your hormones and things like that. There's certain foods, absolutely. But this is where I'd sort of say, like, if it's prescriptive that, Edwina, you must eat broccoli, you must eat this, you must eat that, and you eat those foods and you feel bloated every time you eat them, or you feel constipated, or they just sit high up under your rib cage and you feel uncomfortable, then they're not the right sort of foods for you. So then we need to, and by paying attention, because I think we lose that that mindfulness and awareness of how we eat, because I think we do so much on the go. So we might just chuck a bunch of stuff in a smoothie and then drink the smoothie straight from the blender into the car, and we're drinking it while we're driving to work, right? Or we're just grabbing lunch and we're eating lunch at our desk.
Yeah.
And then we're eating dinner, but we're just sort of like, eating our dinner really quickly because we're on to the next thing. So I think what we need to do, and to become more intuitive, is to become more mindful about what we're eating and also how we're eating. So to sort of sit, particularly, for women who are struggling with their weight, for women who are struggling with, any bloating or constipation or digestive issues, for women who, feel sluggish, and they just don't feel energized. And even, problems sleeping at night, things like that. So if we start to sort of actually pay attention to what we eat. So I hear from a lot of women that, they know, for example, that bread and pasta doesn't sit well with them. So, so that's a really good start, like the fact that they've identified that bread and pasta. but, you know, it could be, you know, some of the healthy foods that they're eating. So if we're overdoing it on, you know, raw vegetables for some women, you know, that can just be too much load on their digestive system. And certainly when we hit perimenopause and menopause, our hormones start to change. So the way our body starts to digest food starts to change. So we naturally start producing less stomach acid. So stomach acid helps break our you know, it's part of our gastric juices, and it's all of our digestive enzymes, and it breaks our food down so our body can absorb the nutrients from those foods. But when we are producing less stomach acid, less digestive enzymes, it just makes that process a little bit harder. So this is where, you know, slowing down when we start to eat can be really beneficial. So I always sort of tell my clients, you know, have your meal, like be present with your meal, sit down, have, you know, cutlery, so ideally a knife and fork. So again, it's not just something we can like shovel in our mouths. It's, you know, we've got to sit, eat, take a bite, put the cutlery down, chew our food, you know, feel what that food feels like, you know, actually taste that food, and then enjoy it. And if there is, you know, something, you know, there's no sort of like perfect way to eat. But if we are, and I'm not an advocate of any one particular style of eating. If there's anything I would lean to, it would be the Mediterranean diet. Which is not pasta, by the way. What it is, you know, it's fresh fruit and vegetables. It's, you know, it's good quality in season fruit and vegetables. So going back to what Sydney had said, is the best food that you can have is what you grow in your backyard. Absolutely. But, you know, if you're aware of, you know, what season are we in, what should we be eating? So for instance, like this, you know, this time of year, we've got an abundance of beautiful stone fruits, you know, beautiful salad greens, beautiful fresh tomatoes, you know, all of those, you know, great fresh, you know, we're so lucky here in Australia to have these foods, but, you know, we don't get good tomatoes all year round. We don't get good avocados all year round. We don't get, you know, mangoes all year round. We might be able to buy them all year round, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should. Yeah. So, you know, you can download sort of there's a million of them, but you can download sort of seasonal food guides. And that goes a long way into just, you know, oh yeah, this grows abundantly, and it's ultimately cheaper too. So then, you know, fresh food in season is going to be more nutritious. You know, it's ideally if you can get it locally grown, it hasn't traveled huge differences. Because when we buy food out of season, you know, it's shipped from South America. So South America to Australia, you know, you think about the time, that's a lot of hours and a lot of miles that food has traveled. So to eat seasonally, eat locally if we can, you know, is a really good start. When it comes to protein, I'm not a huge fan of women in perimenopause and menopause being vegan. I think once you're post-menopause, you can afford to play around with things a bit more. But while you're going through that huge hormonal transition, I see a lot of women who are vegan or have been, you know, really low on animal protein for quite some time, always tired, always, you know, hair falling out, you know, they're just not well. And I think, you know, just that lack of iron, because we can have like heavier periods in perimenopause, you know, we're just losing iron. We just can't replace it through a vegan diet without, you know, really being conscious and really being on top of supplements and, you know, but iron, zinc, B12, omega-3s, you know, all of those things that we get so beautifully from our food is just lacking in a vegan diet. So But if you, and again, I'm a big believer that we should all be able to choose. So if you are choosing a vegan diet, make sure you're doing it under the guidelines of a qualified practitioner who is keeping an eye on, how you're feeling. And if it's, you can source ethically raised animal products, and even starting with eggs can be, a massive make a massive difference health-wise for someone on a vegan diet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to upset all the vegans, but yeah.
I get that. And I think if I can chime in here a little bit, I became convinced that being vegetarian was the ethical decision that I wanted to make, and was vegetarian for nearly 20 years. I breastfed for 6 years, my 4 children, on a vegetarian diet, and was constantly, I had all the training, I had like all the organic diet, made everything from scratch, was ticking all the boxes, and just was never really well, and ended up marrying a South African, and there was a lot of meat started coming into the house, and then somebody said to me, look, why don't you just try having some red meat and see if it makes a difference. I think one of the big things was the quantity of food that I had to eat as a vegetarian compared to what I eat when I have that high fat, high protein diet. My health just turned around on a dime. It was quite amazing. So that was as somebody that had all the information.
Yes.
But it made a massive difference to my health.
It does. And I'd see it time and time again. And, like I always want to try and respect someone's choices.
Yeah, of course.
But, there's only so much we can do with supplements as well. Yeah. So, but I just think during that perimenopause time, it's hard enough as it is, to sort of stay on top of your energy. And being low in iron, because it starts to then have this knock-on effect through your body. So it starts to affect your thyroid, it starts to affect your insulin production, your cortisol production. So everything is under more pressure. And then on the flip side, like the carnivore diet, like I'm seeing more and more people on that, and our body needs a mix. We can't just survive on one kind of type of food. And I think, the carnivore diet's all well and good, but, you can have too much protein, you can have too much fat. So, we do need those beautiful plants, like lots of different colors, as fresh as we can, because that's ultimately what feeds our gut bugs. So, if we have a healthy digestive system, we eat food, and then, maybe 2 to 3 times a day, we, go to the toilet, we have a healthy, well-formed, easy to pass poo. Now, if we are straining, that's a problem. If we aren't going at least once a day, that's a problem. If it's runny or explosive, that's a problem. If we feel bloated, that's a problem. So we need to kind of like identify what's going on. But the place I always start is, are we getting a good mix and a good variety of fresh fruit, fresh vegetables in our diet, because that feeds our good gut bugs, keeps our good gut bugs happy, and then that sort of forms, I'm sure we've talked about that gut-brain connection before, and that sort of helps then, feed and helps make our neurotransmitters, which then goes to our brain, and that's our dopamine, that's our serotonin, that's all of our happy hormones that help us stay nice and calm and in control during this stage of life. Because, if we've got an upset gut and our gut's not happy, we just don't have what we need to keep those neurotransmitters going.
Yeah. I think, where I want to take this conversation, because it's something that I feel really passionate about, is, I've got my clients know me for having bumper stickers, and one of the bumper stickers that's not mine. I can't even think who I got it from, but it's, like what you focus on expands. And as a woman who's now in menopause, I've got girlfriends, I've got people in my world that there is so much fear and stress and anxiety around perimenopause and menopause, and an expectation that it's going to be a miserable time of life.
Yes.
And I feel very sad that this is the conversation that's become so
Yeah.
prevalent. And I think that we have a tendency as humans, and like we can go back to the diet conversation, but we have a tendency to grab hold of something and take everything to extremes.
Yeah.
So we look for the next great diet. So then
Yeah.
along comes carnivore, and
Yeah.
my experience is there's benefit in carnivore as a therapeutic,
Yeah.
for a period of time. It seems
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
benefits, and so
It's
these,
like a circuit breaker.
yeah, that's a great way to look at it. So when we talk about medicine, about food as medicine, I like to really think about, like if we need to fix a symptom, our body is talking to us. We're trusting our bodies. Our bodies are saying, hang on, something's out of alignment. Something doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
We need to make a change. Then
Yeah.
listening to that, that's a therapeutic step.
Yeah.
But if we look at um, using food as a preventative health measure to support health, then
Yeah.
there's two different conversations. One sort of the longevity of the way that we eat, and the other is a therapeutic short-term
Yes.
approach.
Yeah.
So when to break this fear, focusing on the fear of perimenopause and menopause, and I talk about the three levels of creation. We're creating our lives through our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. So if our thoughts start with the expectation that we're heading into a period of misery,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's going to come true.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's start with doing a circuit breaker for anybody that's approaching this stage or in this stage of like breaking this thought, the first stage of manifesting what is to come.
Yeah.
How do you talk about perimenopause and menopause, and in a way of preventative health, and in a way of trusting ourselves and noticing what we notice in our bodies?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a really critical time and a really critical point in our life when it comes to our health. And I read something the other day. I don't know if it's true or not, but it kind of just stuck with me that from the age, like, whereas basically, I don't want to say this is as good as it gets, but if we don't actively make a choice now to continue like a good part, like we get to make a choice, right? We get to make which pathway do we want to go. And so, just another story. But so 7 years ago, Sean and I, we sold up in Sydney, we sold our house, we sold everything. We pulled our three kids who were still in primary school at that stage, pulled them out of school, and we traveled around Australia for a year. And so it was before COVID, it was before, it was a thing to do. And we didn't meet that many other families while we were on the road, but we spent a lot of time with the grey nomads.
Yep.
And these would have been people in their, for the most part in their 70s. And they kind of definitely fell into one of two camps. And we had, old mate with his beer gut and his bad knee and, his thongs and his stubbies and his singlet, and he'd kind of like waddle out in the morning and he'd fart and he'd burp, and because we're all camping, so you can hear everything. And then Mrs. Old Mate would fart and burp, and and then she would just like sit all day. And then, at some point their instant coffee would go to the cask wine, and and they would just sit, the two of them, all day.
Yeah.
So there was like 101 Mr. and Mrs. Old Mate.
Yeah.
Then there were the 70-year-olds who were up in the morning and they were doing the hikes, because everywhere you go, like, there's big long gorge walks and hikes that you can do. And, our kids, like, mind you, I always had a bag of snakes in my backpack that I would pull out going, come on, kids, you can do this. But our kids like walked all over Australia. And, then there were these amazing, like people in their 70s, people in their late 70s, early 80s, still doing this. And they were up and they were doing the hikes. And we actually hooked up with my aunt and uncle, and we did the Gibb River Road in the Kimberleys with them. And it was such a beautiful, and they were 77 and 78 at the time. And we would do these big, sort of like 18, 20 kilometre loop walks. And you would sort of walk, say, 7, 8, 9 kilometres. There'd be this beautiful like waterfall and freshwater gorges that we swam in. But we would run, and because we had the kids, it was like a parkour experience for them. So they were running up onto rocks and jumping down, and boundless energy the whole way out, the whole way back.
Yeah.
But my aunt and uncle used to say, "Oh, you guys go ahead. We'll get there when we get there." But they were never really that far behind us.
Yeah.
But they did it, and they would then experience what we experienced. We would get back to the campsite like 3 or 4 hours later. We've had a great day. They would go and have a lie down for the rest of the afternoon. But they did it, and they kind of, and there were so many like them traveling, but then there were so many, we call them the sitters. And, they'd be adjusting their satellite dish so they could watch Home and Away. And, so there was this running joke about, the Home and Away sitters and then the, the active people. And even the kids noticed it, like the kids could see. And there was kind of no in between.
Yeah.
We definitely, it was very obvious to Sean and I. We were like, okay, this is the way we want to age.
Yeah.
And so where were we going with this? But I always tell this story.
I think it's the what you focus on expands. And I think what you're giving us so beautifully and succinctly is that there is a choice. Like there's this path and we have a picture of exactly what it looks like. And there's this path and we have a picture of exactly what it looks like. And we get to choose.
We get to choose. We absolutely get to choose. And I'm just trying to think what the 63 this is my biggest perimenopause thing, is I lose my words halfway through. And anyone who's listened to my podcast, I now just say, I go, okay, the words have gone.
I know the train's left the station. I do that as well.
We used to edit it out. We don't anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, Kylie's brain's gone again. But I think, it makes it relatable, right? I'm right there with everyone. But I read something and it was about the age of 63. So from 63, that's sort of like that tipping point. And they'd done this study. It wasn't a huge study, but they'd done this study of people, and 63 was when, the greatest diagnosis of chronic illness was at age 63. That's what it was. So that's where type 2 diabetes was kicking in. That's where, a lot of people go on blood pressure medication, if not before. But 63 was sort of that tipping point.
Yeah.
Where they needed Nexium to digest their food, where they, so all of a sudden the prescription medication ramped up at age 63.
Yeah.
That's it. So the article's coming back to me now.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, wow, but it's what we do now that determines what happens at 63 and what happens at 73, 83, 93.
Yeah.
So how we choose to nourish our body, and by being mindful and choosing food that works for us, that feels good for us.
Yeah.
Rather than choosing food that makes us feel heavy, makes us feel bloated. I speak to a lot of women around our age who, are choosing to give up alcohol because it stops, they're not sleeping, they're not, and I know myself, I love a glass of wine, but I'm now choosing sleep over a glass of wine most nights. Like I still will have, the odd glass of wine, but I'm not how I used to by any
I've got a really interesting in my mind ongoing conversation. There's a lot of conversations
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on in here. I'm always looking at traditional wisdom. What has worked for centuries, and pictures that have been created for us by our ancestors and people that have come before us and worked out what worked and what didn't work. And then when we've got that, we can graft new onto this,
Yeah,
traditional wisdom that why reinvent the wheel kind of thing.
yeah,
So obviously I was fascinated by the blue zones. For anybody that
yes,
didn't tune
yeah,
into the blue zones, they traveled the world and looked for
yeah,
communities of centenarians, so people that were living to over 100,
yeah,
communities of people and what they were doing. And I found that fascinating.
yeah,
But one thing that they all seemed to have in common was this glass of wine at the end of
yeah,
the day.
yeah,
And of course there's never just this blanket thing. It's always
yeah,
nuanced and
yeah,
there's bits that go into it. And I think one of the things is they don't sit and drink a glass of wine by themselves.
yeah.
It's a community thing.
Social, yeah,
It's coming together, it's connection. I feel like just from the areas that these things happened, that they were very likely made their organic wine, so they didn't have all the additives, preservatives, and things that cause added stress to our bodies.
and they were having it with a good meal.
Having
Yeah,
it with a meal, or
yeah,
all of these things. So I think like we grab these studies and we study a particular demographic of society and then say, right, bad for everyone, don't do.
yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely.
But so I think this comes back to the intuitive thing, the inquisitive thing, the trust
Yeah,
yourself thing. I'm trying to convince myself because I really enjoy having a glass of
yeah,
wine, but like I might have one or two a week, or I might go weeks with nothing, or like it's just sort of
yeah,
ebbs and flows. But there was something that you said, it may have been before we pressed record or early in the conversation about, like what feels good. And, like I jumped on this because it's something that I talk to my clients about as well. But it's not just what feels good. It's not the dopamine hit in the moment. It's
yeah,
like notice what makes you feel good
yeah,
overall.
yeah,
So feeling, it doesn't feel good necessarily to get out the front door or to get off your chair when you're camping and
yeah,
go for the walk. But
yeah,
the feel good comes from doing the thing. And then the feel good is the lasting feeling. So
yeah, absolutely.
it doesn't, it feels good in the minute to have the third glass of wine,
Yeah,
but it doesn't make you feel good
yeah,
overall.
no, no,
And the same with the bag of chips and so on.
yeah.
So using that, and perhaps if we can revisit what you were talking about in terms of that, when we think about the foods that we're choosing and noticing.
Yeah. And for me, I think feeling good and you're eating the right foods for
Mm.
you when you can get out of bed in the morning, you've got plenty of energy, you've got an appetite and you feel hungry. You feel clear in the head and you've got that energy to keep going all day.
Yeah.
You don't have a 3 o'clock in the afternoon slump. You're vital,
Yeah.
so you're energetic, you're vital, you can get through your day, and then you feel tired at night and you sleep. And I think that, and for me, and the women I speak with, energy is the big thing for so many people. So it's sort of like they come to me, they go, oh, I want to lose 10 kilos. And like, okay. And then in my head, I'm like, okay, well, let's just park that for 1 second. How do you feel? How's your energy? And that's what they struggle with.
Yeah.
So when we address the energy levels by sort of changing around the balance of food that they're eating, then this is where we start to dig into the good stuff, because then they have the energy to get up, to exercise, to get up and go for that walk, and they've got I guess, the momentum to keep going and be aware and be able to better tune in. So intuitively then eat what feels good for them. So I think intuitive eating, if we circle back to that, it's not just something that we can just go, oh, I'm just going to eat intuitively now. Like if I ate intuitively, I'd be eating a cheese board for dinner every night, right? Because that's what Kylie's brain would like.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, because I know that cheese would just, a little bit of cheese is good for me. A lot of cheese is not good for me. And, sometimes I lose sight of my limits. With the wine, it goes hand in hand, right? But it's learning, and it's tapping into what is more important. Is it more important for me to wake up and have good energy because I've got a busy day tomorrow? I'm going to get up, I'm going to go take the dog for a walk, I'm going to go to the beach, I've got the shopping, I've got kids sport, I've got this, I've got that, I've got all these things I want to do tomorrow. So it's more important to me to feel good to do that. So therefore, I'm going to choose to eat this.
Yep.
And when you get to that point of being able to choose because it makes you feel good versus choosing it because this is the diet that my nutritionist gave me.
Yeah.
So now I feel restricted and I feel horrible, and I can't take away all my gluten and all my cheese and all my things, and I can't eat this and can't eat that. That doesn't feel good. That's restrictive and that's heavy.
Yeah.
Whereas choosing to eat for energy and eat to fuel your body and eat enough early in the day, I'm going to throw that in there as well, because I see a lot of women who really struggle through the afternoon, and we sort of then talk about, well, what do you eat first up? And because for some reason we've all decided intermittent fasting is a really good thing, they're not having that enough fuel early in the day to nourish them and fuel them through your day. We wouldn't jump in a car in Melbourne and drive to Sydney without putting petrol in it, and expect the car to make it. But we expect ourselves to get through the day. So just a little caveat, there are a lot of benefits to intermittent fasting, but I think for women, particularly in perimenopause and early menopause, we still get the benefits of a 12-hour fast. So if you finish dinner at 7 o'clock at night and you eat breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning, you've got the benefits of intermittent fasting already, because you've given your body a break from digesting and detoxifying.
that thing, yeah.
So you've got the benefits of intermittent fasting, but now you need to fuel your body, particularly if you're low in energy throughout the day. But I throw that in there. I'll get off my soapbox now.
I did, the train just left the station for me too. I just had a moment. I knew there was, when you were talking, there was something. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say.
I do hear from women, oh, I don't eat until lunchtime, or I don't eat until 10 o'clock because I don't have time, because I don't feel like it. I don't feel hungry. But let me tell you, this can be an absolute life changer. If you are low in energy and energy is something that you struggle with, try eating breakfast for a week. And a good protein, have a good source of protein in that breakfast, and some healthy fats, and just see the difference that can make for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like to be an advocate of falling in love with food again, like that, what you focus on expands. There's so much focus on all the things we shouldn't have, all the things we can't have, all the things we shouldn't do, all the, like we can become so hyper fixated in that it takes the joy out of food. Is one of the greatest pleasures in life. Oh my goodness.
When somebody says to me, oh, I'm so hungry, I forgot to have lunch today, I'm like, what? I don't understand. They're like, I've already planned all my meals.
Yes, absolutely. So I know you've got a beautiful experience for us. So what I want to do is I'm going to hand over to you, and when you feel like you're complete with this beautiful experience you're going to take us through, I'll pop back so we can wind up our conversation.
Okay.
So I'm going to put it on. Thanks, Kylie.
All right. Are we on? Okay, so what I thought I'd do, I thought we'd have some fun and really get into sort of like mindfully eating and what that means. So there's sort of like a bit of an exercise, and it's kind of an eating meditation, if you like. But what I would like you to do before we do this is go and get yourself a piece of food. So it could be a square of chocolate if you have, chocolate willy-nilly in the house. I always have some stashed somewhere. So it could be a piece of chocolate, it could be a grape, it could be a piece of watermelon, a slice of peach, could be a piece of cheese. It doesn't matter what it is, but just choose something. And we're going to eat it mindfully. Okay. So pop it in pause while you go and grab your food. And now, welcome back. Now, what I want you to do is put aside all your distractions. So turn off the phone and, just close your eyes, get comfy, and focus on direct, sort of clear awareness, okay, on each aspect and each moment of this experience. So we're going through, it'll be about sort of, I guess, 5 minutes. So first up, just pick up the piece of food that you have in your hand. So imagine that you're an alien, okay? So you've just arrived on planet Earth, and you've never seen such a food before. So what I want you to do is I want you to explore this food with all of your senses. So focus on the piece of food as if you've never seen anything like it before. So really focus on seeing this object, scan it, explore every part of it as though you've never seen it ever in your life. So turn it around in your fingers, notice what color it is, what the creases are, how the light surface reflects. Does it become lighter? Does it become darker? Are there little furry bits? Is it shiny? Now, next, we're going to explore the texture. So any softness there, any hardness, coarse, does it feel smooth? While you're doing this, if any thoughts sort of pop up, like, why is she making us do this? How's this going to help? I actually don't like this food. Then, just acknowledge these thoughts and let them go. Okay, and bring your awareness back to the object. Now I want you to take it just up under your nose and give it a smell. Smell it, breathe it in, bring it to one ear, roll it around. Does it make any sound? Squeeze of juice in your ear. Is there any sound coming? Now I want you to slowly take the object, that piece of food, to your mouth. Notice how your arm knows exactly where to go. Perhaps become aware of your mouth starts to water. We're not putting it in yet, but can you feel that saliva starting? Your mouth is ready to eat. So gently place that piece of food in your mouth. So pop it on your tongue, no biting. I just want you to explore that sensation of it just sitting on your tongue. When you're ready, I want you to slowly lift your tongue up and rub that piece of food along the roof of your mouth. How does it feel in your mouth? How much space does it take up in your mouth? Try and gently bite down on the piece of food. Maybe you notice how it automatically goes to one side of your mouth versus the other. And I want you to notice the taste that food releases. Now I want you to slowly, slowly chew that object. Move it around your mouth with your tongue. Be aware of the saliva in your mouth and how the object changes in consistency as you chew. Now, when you feel ready to swallow, consciously notice the intention to swallow. then see if you can notice the sensations of swallowing the piece of food. Sense it, feel it move into your throat, into your esophagus, and on its way down to your stomach. So congratulate yourself for experiencing mindful eating. Okay, so a few things to sort of think about is, what, if anything, surprised you about, that practice? Were there any thoughts or any memories that popped up while you were doing the practice? Was there any part of it you felt particularly challenging, particularly difficult? Some people don't like having just something sitting in their mouth. Or was it quite easy for you? And what was your experience of eating with such focused attention to just one single object? And then what was the relationship between your expectation of eating and the actual experience of eating? So just a few things to think about there.
Oh, that was so good. That is such a beautiful exercise to do.
Yeah. It's a great one, for food addiction or people who know they eat really fast. And it's a good one, to sort of practice and, at the beginning of each meal. So to actually take that first mouthful of, you can do it with all the different foods on your plate, but take that first mouthful and just pay attention to, how that food feels in your mouth. And I think when we start to do this as often as possible, this is when we start to become more mindful with our eating. And it really helps with, just that mindless snacking, with that, tuning us into like that bodily sensation of, of hunger and pleasure and, and also the fullness associated with eating as well. So yeah, it's something that
the thing that came to my mind is it's actually a really sensual way to eat as well.
Yeah.
It's like the sensualness of just that total experience and presence and mindfulness, and smell it and listen to it and taste it, and it just adds a whole richness to something that's that has become for most of us very mindless. We eat to suppress emotion, we eat to celebrate, we eat to because we're bored and or we're trying to avoid doing something that we're supposed to be doing. The number of times that the number of times working from home and I'm doing something and it's like I don't want to be doing it because it's just like doesn't feel fun, and then I'm like, hang on, why am I standing in the kitchen?
Yeah, I know. Yes, I quite often, find myself at the fridge door hoping that something's appeared in there that wasn't there, half an hour ago.
Yeah, I love everything about this conversation, and that experience is beautiful, and I feel like it's one that we can use over and over and over again. Imagine starting every day with the first bite of food that you have, with a sense of giving thanks that we have this food in the first place, and then to just delight in the pleasure of what we're eating. It's like, what a beautiful ritual to start a day. Very special. I know you have a beautiful gift for our audience. Kylie, did you want to just take a minute to let them know what that is?
Yeah, sure. It's the guide to hormone healthy foods.
Right.
So I'll sort of take you through, and there's some beautiful recipes in there too, but just takes you through, because I'm a nutritionist. So everyone says, what should I eat? What do I need to eat? I don't know. And it is confusing out there. There's so many mixed messages, as we covered today, like vegan, carnivore, you couldn't get too bigger differences right there. But it's just a really practical guide of, how to eat, but it also covers off some essential nutrients that we really do need to pay attention to through perimenopause and, into our menopause year. So iron, some non-dairy sources of calcium, omega-3s, things like that. So just really good examples, just easy things that you can incorporate every day.
Yep. Beautiful. So I've got one last question for you.
Yes.
In the essence of embodying the Empress, where are you? Just like trusting your knowing, whatever comes up, where are you and what are you doing when you feel that beautiful sense of absolute harmony with life, inner peace, beauty? Where are you and what are you doing?
I'm surrounded by people.
Extrovert.
Yes. And then I'm alone. So I think I'm at that stage in life where I very much know what energizes me, and being surrounded by people definitely lifts my energy up. But then I do need that compression time as well. So I have recently sort of started some new ventures, which is a whole other conversation. But really enjoying it because I'm face to face with people. It's amazing.
I love that. I love that. And I love that this question also brings up the understanding that we're all so different. Like there's not a prescription for this. You've got to connect to what evokes that for you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us, Kylie. I love you. I adore you every time that we get to talk.
Right back at you. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everyone for for sticking with their little brain snaps.
It normalizes it for all of us.
The story's good. Just stick with it. Hang on, it'll come back.
hang with me. It's coming. All right, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for being with us. And I will see you again in the next episode of Embody the Empress. So much love. Mwah. And
thanks, everyone. Thanks, Edwina.